This slide is showing the periosteum and the endosteum of a long bone. So when we look at the endosteum, notice that it is the inner region of the medullary cavity, which is found in the diaphysis. The outer membrane, the external membrane is shown here called the periosteum. So kind of think of perimeter. In between that is compact bone. And compact bone is very unique in that the structural component of it is what's called an osteon, which you've seen before on a micrograph. The cells that are shown in the endosteum are on the right-hand side of your slide. There are osteons, and within the osteon are osteocytes, which are mature bone cells, which are in spaces called lacunae. And there are also osteoblasts, which are bone building cells. And there are osteoclasts, which are cells that break down bone. In fact, they're kind of like white blood cells, which are called macrophages. On the left-hand side of this screen, as we zoom in here, we can see the outer membrane called the periosteum, and we have similar structures as well, osteocytes that are in lacuna within much larger osteons. Surrounding the central canal in the osteon is called circumferential lamellae. These are rings that are around the central canal. Our next slide is showing us some flat bones within the skull. These grow or ossify in a little different type of manner. They have two layers of compact bone, and sandwiched between the two layers of compact bone is another type of bone called spongy bone. In this case, it has a specialized name called diploid, which is sandwiched between the compact bone. Now, looking at the microscopic anatomy of bones, we have these specialized bones, which I've already mentioned to you in the previous slide. Important cells are osteoblasts. These are bones that secrete matrix called osteoid. So I want you to think of them as bone building cells. And this is all in a process of bone remodeling. The cells that sort of oppose the act of osteoblasts are cells responsible for bone resorption, which is sort of like bone destruction. They dissolve bone matrix by releasing calcium from the bone into the blood. Now, when these osteoblasts develop into mature bone cells, they're called osteocytes, and they're surrounded in a space called a lacuna, or lacunae for plural. So the microscopic anatomy of bones, we have two types of bones, one called the compact bone and another called spongy bone, which, as you've seen, are located primarily in the diaphysis of long bones. The compact bone has a structural or functional unit called the osteon, which almost looks like when you look at growth rings of a tree, it looks like a similar structure. And it's on the external surface of long and flat bones. The spongy bone has specialized units on it called trabeculae, and in flat bones, it has a structure called diploid, which is sandwiched between the two layers of compact bone. Within the osteon are several important structures. These are very important cylindrical structures that run parallel to the diaphysis, which, remember, is the shaft of the long bone. Some of these structures within the osteon include a central canal, which is what carries blood vessels and nerves in the center of the osteon. Surrounding that central canal in rings are called concentric lamellae. They are matrix rings of bone around the central canal. And then within lacuna are these mature bone cells called osteocytes between these lamellae. Connecting adjacent spaces called lacuna are tiny canals or tiny channels called canaliculi. Running perpendicular to and connecting multiple central canals are what are called perforating channels. And there are also other lamellae, which are called circumferential lamellae, which are immediately internal to the periosteum or internal to the endosteum. And then between osteons are interstitial lamellae. So the term lamella, remember that it's a ring. Some of them can be directly around central canals. Some of them can be between neighboring osteons. This diagram shows you the components of the compact bone. So I'm going to zoom in so we can see this a little bit more. And notice this is taken from the diaphysis of the humerus in this case. It could very easily be taken from another long bone, such as the femur or the tibia, fibula, radius, ulna. So in the very center of this osteon, we have a central canal. Notice there are blood vessels as well as nerves. And that entire circular structure is, in fact, the osteon. You can see brackets, which are showing you the entire shape of one osteon. Surrounding each osteon would be a lamella, and those happen to be called concentric lamellae, which are directly surrounding the osteon. So this would be one concentric lamella. The little spaces, or where they look like little spaces, are called lacunae. And within those spaces are mature bone cells called osteocytes. There are also various other lamella based on where they are located at. There are internal circumferential lamella, interstitial lamella, which means they're between osteocytes. We have external circumferential lamella close to the periosteum. And then notice near the endosteum, where there is some spongy bone found, in this case, in the medullary cavity, the trabecula kind of look like woven bone. So this is showing our microscopic anatomy of compact bone, specifically the osteons. So we can see a lacuna within an osteocyte, our central canal in the middle. The concentric lamellae are surrounding it. And then the lines that you see in this direction, where I am drawing the red lines, in this case, are called canaliculi. And the image which is directly beneath it here, we can see multiple osteons. This would be a central canal, another central canal, and so on, of osteons. This is another view of one osteon. And down here is spongy bone, which looks quite a bit different, and showing the trabecula of spongy bone. Again, sometimes referred to as woven bone.